You believe your power comes from what you say, from the arguments you win, the explanations you give, the proof you present, the noise you create. You believe that if people just understood your intentions, they would value you, respect you, fear you. But that belief is wrong. In fact, it is dangerous. Because the more you speak, the more you reveal. The more you reveal, the more predictable you become. And the more predictable you are, the easier you are to manipulate, control, and quietly dismantle. You think your voice protects you. But in truth, it exposes you. Your silence, on the other hand, that is where your real power begins. People fear silence more than they fear confrontation. Silence forces them to face themselves, their insecurities, their assumptions, their imagination. And imagination is far more terrifying than anything you could ever say out loud. Silence becomes a mirror, reflecting their hidden fears back at them. In silence, people project. They confess without knowing. They reveal their intentions while trying to guess yours. Silence bends their mental balance, because the human mind hates the unknown. It hates not knowing what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you truly want. It drives them to react, and whoever reacts first loses. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Silence is not just the absence of speech. It is the presence of control. When you withhold your voice, you force the world to move around you, to adjust itself to you, to fill the space you create. In that space, people expose their motives, their agendas, their desires. They speak to impress you, to win you, to convince you. They reveal more about themselves than you ever could by questioning them. You simply give them nothing, and they give you everything. This is why Machiavelli understood that silence is not passive. It is strategic. It is the first move of those who hold real power. The kings who rarely spoke. The rulers who never reacted impulsively. The leaders who allowed others to argue and reveal themselves while they simply observed. Those were the ones people feared. Not because they were violent, not because they were loud, but because they were unreadable, and nothing is more threatening than a person you cannot read. You might think you need to defend yourself when attacked, explain yourself when misunderstood, justify yourself when questioned. But the truth is the opposite. When you defend yourself, you admit vulnerability. When you explain yourself, you acknowledge doubt. When you justify yourself, you surrender authority. Silence denies all of that. Silence says, I owe you nothing. Silence says, you do not control my reactions. Silence says, I am not affected by your expectations. But again, there is a deeper truth hiding underneath. Powerful silence isn't about shutting your mouth. It's about disciplining your mind. It is the art of choosing what deserves your energy and what does not. It is the refusal to be dragged into emotional traps. It is the psychological armor that separates the manipulated from the untouchable. Because the moment you respond emotionally, you give someone access to your inner workings. You give them a map to your weaknesses. But when you remain silent, they are left wandering in the dark. Most people don't understand this. They think silence is weakness. They think silence means surrender. But that only shows how little they understand power. Silence is dominance disguised as restraint. The lion doesn't roar before it strikes. The snake doesn't hiss before it bites. The most dangerous forces in nature are quiet, still, unpredictable. They do not announce themselves. They do not warn their prey. They wait. They observe. They choose their moment. And then they act with precision. If you want power, you must move the same way. But this is only the beginning, because silence does something even more potent. It exposes the hidden psychology of other people. When you stop talking, others will rush to fill the silence. They will overshare. They will reveal their uncertainties. They will expose their insecurities. They will confess their intentions. Without you asking a single question, they will unfold themselves in front of you, because the discomfort of silence forces them to speak impulsively. And impulsive words are truth, but even that is not the deepest part. Silence gives you time, and time is the one resource manipulators, liars, and pretenders cannot control. When you are silent, you are thinking. When they are loud, they are reacting. You gain clarity while they lose stability. Silence is a pause that elevates your awareness. It is a breath that positions your mind above the chaos. It is a shield that protects you from acting too soon, saying too much, or revealing too deeply. But there is still a more dangerous truth we haven't reached. Silence becomes a weapon when it disrupts patterns. Humans rely on predictability. They expect you to respond the way you usually do. They expect your habits, your reactions, your emotional expressions. When you suddenly become silent, the pattern breaks. The entire psychological dynamic shifts. The balance tilts. Suddenly, you are no longer the one being observed. You are the one observing. And they begin adjusting themselves to your silence. They begin negotiating with their own anxiety. They begin imagining the worst. Machiavelli understood something that most people today do not. Silence is terrifying because it creates power gaps. And power gaps create psychological instability. When someone doesn't know how you feel, what you want, or what you're thinking, they become cautious. They become careful. They become submissive, even if they don't admit it. Silence forces them into a position of uncertainty, and uncertainty breeds fear. But fear is not the goal, control is. Silence gives you that control because it shifts the power dynamic from expression to observation. You are no longer the performer, you are the judge. You are no longer reacting, you are assessing. You are no longer driven by emotion, you are driven by strategy. And strategy always wins over impulse. But there is a deeper, darker truth beneath all of this. Silence protects your identity. In a world where everyone is loud, expressive, emotional, and constantly broadcasting their thoughts, the silent one becomes a mystery. And mystery is magnetic. Mystery forces people to lean in, to analyze, to interpret, to wonder. The less they know about you, the more powerful the image they construct in their minds. And the image people imagine is always more intimidating than the reality. When you speak too much, people define you. But when you speak very little, they imagine you. And imagination has no limits. This is why the most intimidating presence in a room is often the one who says the least. Not because they are weak, but because they don't need validation. They don't need to prove themselves. They don't need to show off. Their silence becomes a statement of independence, a declaration of self-sufficiency, and that is a silent threat to anyone who depends on external approval. But again, there is still a deeper truth. Silence is your shield. It prevents you from saying things you can't take back. It prevents you from revealing your plans to people who don't deserve to hear them. It prevents your emotions from becoming weapons others can use against you. Noise reveals your vulnerabilities. Silence protects them. And there is more. Silence tests loyalty. When you withdraw your attention, you see who notices. You see who panics. You see who respects your silence and who tries to break it. You see who steps closer and who quietly steps away. Silence reveals who is truly connected to you and who is merely attached to your noise. But the darkest truth is this: silence forces others to fight their own minds. And the mind is the most ruthless enemy a person can face. When you are silent, people argue with themselves. They question themselves. They doubt themselves. They battle their assumptions, their guilt, their fears. You don't have to fight them. They fight themselves. And this is where silence becomes a weapon more powerful than words, more effective than arguments, more destructive than confrontation. Because the moment someone starts fighting their own mind, you have already won. But we have still not touched the deepest layer. Silence gives you psychological invisibility. When you talk, people trace your reasoning. When you express emotions, they track your motives. When you react, they predict your next move. Silence erases the trail. Silence hides your plans. Silence keeps your intentions in the shadows. Silence removes the footprint of your strategy. This is why the most successful people, politically, socially, financially, speak less than others. Their silence protects their trajectory. Their silence keeps their next move hidden. Their silence safeguards their long-term power. Machiavelli would say, "Never reveal your mind, reveal your outcomes." And silence is how you do that. But this truth becomes even darker. Silence allows you to read people with precision. When you speak, you only hear your own voice. When you stay silent, you hear everything else. You begin noticing things you never saw before: tone changes, hesitations, inconsistencies, emotional cracks, hidden intentions. Silence sharpens your perception. It trains your intuition. It strengthens your psychological advantage. Most people don't actually listen. They wait for their turn to speak. But the silent one truly listens. And a person who listens more than they speak holds the keys to understanding human nature. But the deepest truth of all is this: silence changes you. It hardens you. It refines you. It strengthens you. It teaches you that you don't need to respond to everything. You don't need to explain yourself. You don't need to justify your decisions. You don't need to make noise to be powerful. Your restraint becomes your command. Your stillness becomes your presence. Your silence becomes your authority. And eventually, you realize something profound. The loudest person holds attention, but the quietest person holds power. This is the paradox few ever understand. And now you're beginning to understand why your silence has always been your most dangerous weapon, not because it hides your weakness, but because it reveals theirs. You started this video believing your voice was your power. Now you know the truth. Your silence is far more lethal, far more strategic, far more psychologically effective. So, the next time someone tries to provoke you, stay silent. The next time someone expects a reaction, stay silent. The next time you feel the urge to explain, stay silent. Let your silence do the work. Let their mind do the damage. Let your presence speak without sound. Because silence is not the absence of power, silence is power.